The sound of Ashley's heels clicking on our hardwood floor at 3 in the morning used to make my heart race with worry. Now, it just made me want to laugh. My wife had gotten predictable in her unpredictability, if that makes any sense. Every Tuesday and Thursday, she'd stumble through our front door with that particular brand of guilt that drunk people wear like cheap perfume. I'm Wade Phillips, and I weld things for a living. Oil pipelines, refinery equipment, the occasional structural work when some corporate hotshot decides they need custom railings for their fancy office building. I work the night shift at Millfield Refinery, pulling down 75 Ks a year with overtime, and I'm damn good with my hands. Better with numbers too, and apparently terrible at picking wives, but we'll get to that. Wade, you awake? Ashley's voice carried that sing-song quality she got when she'd been drinking wine with the girls. Except, I was pretty sure the girls weren't involved anymore. I kept my breathing steady, eyes closed. Our bedroom door creaked open and I heard her fumble around in the dark. The smell hit me first. Cologne that definitely wasn't mine mixed with something else. Something expensive that made my stomach turn. She slipped into bed beside me and I felt her whole body tense when she realized I was awake. We lay there in the dark, both pretending to sleep, both knowing the other was lying. How was Rachel's? I asked quietly. Fine. We just talked about stuff. Girl stuff. Rachel Cooper ran the local nail salon and hadn't spoken to Ashley in 6 months. I knew because Rachel's husband, Clay, worked the welding crew with me, and Clay couldn't keep a secret if his life depended on it. That's nice, I said. You smell different. Ashley shifted away from me. New perfume. Rachel let me try it. I turned over and looked at her in the dim light filtering through our bedroom curtains. Even in the darkness, I could see the guilt written across her face like graffiti on a refinery wall. Her lipstick was gone. Her hair was messed up in a way that suggested hands other than her own. And there was a hickey on her neck that she'd tried to cover with foundation. Ashley, I said, keeping my voice calm, we need to talk. Not now, Wade. I'm tired. When then? 'Cause we've been not talking for months now. She sat up in bed, and even drunk, her eyes had that calculating look I'd been seeing more and more lately. The same look she got when she was working a difficult client, trying to close a real estate deal that was slipping away from her. You want to talk? Fine. Let's talk about how suffocating this marriage has become. How I feel like I'm drowning in this little town with the same people doing the same things every single day. So, talk to me about it. We're supposed to be partners. Partners? She laughed, and it wasn't a nice sound. It was the kind of laugh you hear in the break room when someone's making fun of the new guy who doesn't know he's being set up. Wade, I'm 32 years old. I got married when I was 24 because I thought that's what I was supposed to do, but I never got to explore my options. I never got to see what else was out there. There it was, the word that would change everything. Options. What kind of options, Ashley? She looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her expression. A kind of cruel honesty that booze sometimes brings out in people. The kind where they tell you exactly what they think of you when they think you can't fight back. The kind where I don't have to pretend to be happy with a welder who thinks dinner at Chili's is fancy. The words hit like a welding spark to bare skin, but I kept my voice steady. Years of working with molten metal had taught me that the worst burns come when you react too fast to pain. So, what are you saying? I'm saying, maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we both deserve better. I sat up and turned on the bedside lamp. Ashley squinted in the sudden light, and I got a good look at her. Really looked. The woman I'd married had been ambitious but kind, driven but considerate. She'd brought me coffee on cold mornings and worried when I worked double shifts. This person sitting next to me was someone else entirely. You're seeing someone, I said. It wasn't a question. Wade, who is it? She was quiet for so long, I thought she might not answer. The digital clock on her nightstand glowed 3:47 a.m., and I could hear the distant hum of the refinery where I should have been working my shift, where honest men were doing honest work while my wife sat in our bed, trying to figure out how much truth she could afford to tell me. Then, Preston Brooks, the hotshot corporate lawyer who'd moved to Millfield 2 years ago to handle oil industry contracts. He'd been divorced for exactly 8 months and had been working his way through the town's married women like he was checking items off a grocery list. I'd heard the stories at the refinery break room, but I'd never thought they'd include my wife. How long? Does it matter? It matters to me. She took a breath like she was about to dive underwater. 6 months. 6 months. While I'd been working 60-hour weeks to save money for the vacation she'd been begging for. While I'd been planning our 8th wedding anniversary. While I'd been trying to figure out how to make her happy again. She'd been making herself happy with someone else. I want you to leave, I said quietly. Wade, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. No, I want you to pack a bag and leave tonight. She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. Where am I supposed to go? I looked at her. This woman who just told me she'd been cheating on me for 6 months, who'd called our marriage a mistake, who'd made it clear she thought she was too good for me. Call Preston. I'm sure he's got room. She got out of bed and started throwing clothes into a suitcase, muttering under her breath about how unreasonable I was being, how I was overreacting, how this was exactly why she'd been unhappy. As she packed, I made a decision that would change everything. Ashley wanted to explore her options. Fine. But she was about to learn that actions have consequences, and I was very, very good at following through. 20 minutes later, she was gone in her Mercedes, the car her real estate success had bought. I sat on the edge of our bed, looking at the empty space where she'd been, and started planning. The refinery had taught me that every successful project starts with proper preparation and attention to detail. This was going to be the most important project of my life. The next morning, I called in sick to the refinery for the first time in 2 years. I had research to do, and it couldn't wait for my next scheduled day off. I started with the obvious places. Ashley's Facebook page had become a foreign landscape over the past few months, full of cryptic posts about new beginnings and following your heart. Her Instagram showed pictures from places I'd never been with her. Expensive restaurants in Houston, wine bars I couldn't afford, art galleries that would have bored me to tears. But it was the timing that told the real story. Most of these photos were taken during hours when she should have been showing houses to clients. The phone records were where I struck gold. I'd been paying our cell phone bill for 8 years, which meant I had access to detailed records of every call and text. The number that appeared most frequently over the past 6 months belonged to Preston Brooks. Hundreds of texts, hours of phone calls, usually late at night when I was at the refinery or early in the morning when I was sleeping off a night shift. I printed everything out and spread it across our kitchen table like evidence in a homicide case. Because, in a way, that's what it was. The homicide of my marriage, planned and executed while I'd been oblivious, working my ass off to keep us financially secure. My phone rang around 10:00 a.m. Clay. Hey man, you feeling all right? Supervisor said you called in sick. Ashley and I are getting divorced. Silence on the other end, then, shit. I'm sorry, Wade. What happened? She's been sleeping with Preston Brooks for 6 months. That piece of garbage lawyer? Jesus, Wade, I'm really sorry. Don't be sorry yet. I'm just getting started. Clay was quiet for a moment, and I could almost hear him thinking. We'd worked together for 5 years, through plant shutdowns and emergency repairs, and he knew me well enough to understand that I didn't make threats I couldn't back up. What do you need? This was why I liked Clay. No judgment, no useless platitudes about how things would work out. Just, what do you need? Information, and maybe some help with a project. You got it. Clay came over that afternoon with a 6-pack of Lone Star and a manila folder full of information about Preston Brooks that would have impressed a private investigator. Turns out, when you work in an industry where safety depends on knowing who you can trust, word travels fast about people's character. Your boy Preston's got quite the reputation, Clay said, spreading papers across my kitchen table. Divorced his first wife after cheating on her with 3 different women. Lost half his assets in the settlement. He's been working his way through the married women in town ever since. How'd you find all this out? My cousin works at the courthouse. Preston's ex-wife filed some interesting paperwork during their divorce. Apparently, he's got a thing for other people's wives. Makes him feel powerful or some shit. I studied the papers. Bank records showing Preston's financial situation wasn't as good as he pretended. Court documents from his divorce revealing a pattern of infidelity and emotional manipulation. Even a police report from a domestic disturbance call that had been dropped when his ex-wife refused to press charges. There's more, Clay said, pulling out another set of documents. Jessica Martinez at the bank says Ashley's been in there multiple times over the past 6 months, asking about separating your accounts. She opened a new account with just her name on it back in January. Jessica Martinez had been our mortgage officer when we bought the house. She'd also been Clay's girlfriend since high school, and she still had a soft spot for him. More importantly, she had access to financial records and a memory for details that made her invaluable in situations like this. How much money are we talking about? About $18,500 so far. She's been moving money from your joint savings into her personal account. Small amounts, probably hoping you wouldn't notice until she was ready to disappear completely. $18,500. Money I'd saved working overtime and weekends, 16-hour shifts when the plant needed emergency repairs. Money that was supposed to pay for the new truck I'd been wanting, or maybe finally finishing the garage workshop I'd been planning for years. Instead, it had been funding my wife's affair with a lawyer who probably made more in a month than I did in 3. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger. Anger was hot and messy and made you do stupid things like punching holes in walls or getting drunk and making threats you couldn't follow through on. This was something else, something calculating and patient. Something that reminded me of the precision required to weld a perfect seam under pressure. Clay, how do you feel about a little surveillance work? He grinned and took a long pull from his beer. I thought you'd never ask. We spent the rest of the afternoon planning. Clay had a friend who worked in private security and could get us some basic surveillance equipment. Nothing illegal, just cameras and GPS trackers that anyone could buy online with a credit card and a mailing address. We mapped out Preston's routine based on information Clay had gathered from various sources around town. The beauty of living in a place like Millfield was that everybody knew everybody else's business, especially when that business involved someone who thought he was better than the rest of us. Preston lived in a fancy apartment complex on the outskirts of town, the kind with a pool and a fitness center that charged twice what a normal apartment cost. He drove a leased BMW that he parked in the same spot every night. He ate lunch at the same restaurant every Tuesday and Thursday. He worked out at the same gym every morning at 6 a.m., probably trying to maintain the physique that helped him seduce other men's wives. Creatures of habit, Clay observed, studying the timeline we'd put together. Makes them easy to track. By evening, we had a plan. Nothing illegal, nothing that would get us arrested, but comprehensive enough to document everything Ashley and Preston were doing. I wanted evidence. I wanted proof that would hold up in court, and I wanted them to know I had it. My phone buzzed around 8 p.m. A text from Ashley. We need to talk. This is childish. I showed it to Clay. He shook his head and laughed. She's got balls. I'll give her that. I typed back, you wanted to explore your options. Explore away. Her response came immediately. You're being ridiculous. It's not what you think. 6 months of phone records say otherwise. The typing indicator appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, how did you get my phone records? I pay the bill, remember? Have a nice evening with Preston. She didn't respond after that. The surveillance equipment arrived 2 days later in unmarked packages that Clay's security friend had arranged. Nothing fancy, just basic cameras, audio recorders, and GPS trackers that thousands of suspicious spouses used every year. All perfectly legal, as long as we didn't trespass or break any privacy laws. I spent Wednesday morning installing a GPS tracker on Ashley's Mercedes. She'd taken it when she left, and according to the apartment complex's visitor log that Clay had sweet-talked out of the front desk clerk, it was currently parked in Preston's assigned spot. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was tracking my own wife using a car I'd helped her buy with money I'd earned welding pipes at the refinery. I waited until they'd both left for work, Preston to his law office downtown, Ashley to her real estate job, then walked over like I belonged there. The tracker attached to the underside of her car with a magnetic mount, invisible unless you knew where to look, and it would tell me everywhere. She went for the next 6 months. Clay handled the more technical aspects. He set up a camera across the street from Preston's apartment complex, hidden in what looked like a routine utility box. Another camera went in the parking lot of Ashley's real estate office, positioned to catch them meeting during work hours. We even managed to get audio surveillance equipment into the Red Roof Inn on Route 45, where Clay's cousin worked part-time as a maintenance guy. This feels like we're running some kind of spy operation, Clay said as we tested the equipment from his truck. We are. except instead of national security, we're protecting my bank account and what's left of my dignity. The first real intelligence came in on Thursday afternoon. The GPS tracker showed Ashley's car at the Red Roof Inn, about 20 miles outside Millfield. She'd been there for 2 hours during what should have been her workday, supposedly showing a house to a client from Austin. Clay and I drove out to confirm. Sure enough, there was her Mercedes parked next to Preston's BMW in the lot of the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions about why a corporate lawyer and a married real estate agent needed privacy in the middle of a workday. Classy? Clay muttered, taking photos with a telephoto lens. Really shows respect for the institution of marriage. I watched through binoculars as Preston emerged from room 127, straightening his tie and checking his watch like he had somewhere important to be. 5 minutes later, Ashley came out, smoothing down her skirt and trying to fix her hair in the reflection of a car window. Even from a distance, I could see the guilt in her body language, the way she kept looking around to make sure nobody was watching. They didn't kiss goodbye or even acknowledge each other. Preston got in his BMW and drove away toward town. Ashley waited another 10 minutes, probably checking her makeup and rehearsing whatever lie she was going to tell. If anyone asked where she'd been, then followed. Professional, I said, lowering the binoculars. They've got this down to a system. Multiple times a week, I'd guess, Clay replied, reviewing the photos on his camera. This isn't their first rodeo. That evening, I got a text from Ashley. Can we please talk like adults? This situation isn't good for either of us. I stared at the message for a long time, thinking about her in that motel room while I'd been welding pipeline joints at the refinery, working to pay the bills for a marriage that had already been over for months, working to maintain the life she was systematically dismantling behind my back. I typed back, "You're right. We should definitely talk like adults. Adults who don't sneak around motel rooms during work hours." My phone rang immediately. "Wade, how did you know about the Red Roof?" "GPS tracker. Very useful technology." Silence on the other end. I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to figure out what else I might know. "Wade, you're scaring me. This isn't like you." "You're right. The old me would have been devastated. The old me would have begged you to come back and work things out. But the old me didn't know his wife was a cheating liar who'd been stealing money from their joint accounts. I wasn't stealing. $18,500, Ashley. Moved into an account I didn't even know existed. What would you call that?" Another long silence. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller, more uncertain. "I want my things from the house." "That's fine, but I'll be there when you come to get them. And so will my lawyer." "Your lawyer? Did you think I was going to handle this divorce myself? I may be just a welder, but I'm not stupid." I'd actually called 3 lawyers that morning. The first 2 had been sympathetic, but not particularly aggressive. The third, Stephanie Torres, had listened to my story, with the kind of cold attention that told me she'd heard variations of it many times before. When I finished, she said 6 words that made me hire her on the spot. "Let's make this expensive for her." Stephanie was in her 50s, recently divorced herself, and had a reputation for being absolutely ruthless in family court. She charged $250 an hour, which was more than I made in a day, but she was worth every penny. "We'll start with a forensic accountant," she told me during our consultation. "If she's been moving money around, we'll find all of it. Then we'll document the infidelity. Texas still considers that in property division, even though it's a no-fault state. By the time we're done, she'll be lucky to get her clothes and her car." Ashley came by the house on Friday evening to collect some of her belongings. I'd changed the locks, perfectly legal since the house was in my name, so she had to knock. She looked different, thinner, more nervous. The confidence she'd displayed when she left had been replaced by something that looked like worry. "The locks," she said when I opened the door. "Security precaution. Come in." Stephanie was sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of papers and a digital recorder. She stood when Ashley entered, extending her hand with professional courtesy that masked the predatory intelligence in her eyes. "Mrs. Phillips, I'm Stephanie Torres, Wade's attorney. I'll be observing while you collect your personal items." Ashley looked between us, and I saw her realize that this wasn't going to be the simple, amicable divorce she'd probably been imagining, the kind where she got to keep half of everything while starting fresh with her new boyfriend. "This seems excessive," she said, her voice carrying that real estate agent tone she used when she was trying to regain control of a situation. Infidelity and financial fraud tend to complicate things, Stephanie replied calmly, settling back into her chair. We want to make sure there's no confusion about what belongs to whom. As Ashley packed her clothes, Stephanie and I sat in the living room, discussing strategy in voices just loud enough for her to hear. It was psychological warfare at its finest, and I was learning that my lawyer was a master tactician. The motel receipts will be particularly damaging, Stephanie said, flipping through a folder of documentation, especially since they show a pattern over several months, and the financial records paint a clear picture of someone planning to abandon the marriage while securing assets. What kind of settlement are we looking at? I asked, playing my part in the performance. Given the infidelity and the attempted asset concealment, she'll be lucky to get 20% of the marital property. Maybe less if we can prove she was planning to leave even before the affair started. From the bedroom came the sound of Ashley dropping something heavy. Glass from the sound of it. She emerged 20 minutes later with 2 suitcases and a box of personal items. Her face was pale, and her hands were shaking slightly as she set everything by the front door. Wade, we don't have to do this. We can work something out between ourselves. I looked at her, really looked at her for the first time since she'd left. The woman who'd promised to love and honor me. The woman who'd shared my bed for 8 years while planning her escape with another man. The woman who'd stolen money from our joint accounts to fund her affair. You're right, I said. We don't have to do this. You could have talked to me about being unhappy. You could have suggested marriage counseling. You could have asked for a separation. Instead, you chose to lie, cheat, and steal. So, now we do this my way. She left without another word, and I watched her load her belongings into her Mercedes under the porch light. Part of me felt sorry for her, but that part was getting smaller every day. The annual Refinery Family Day was Millfield's biggest social event of the year. 3 days of barbecue, live music, carnival rides, and enough gossip to fuel the town's rumor mill until Christmas. 800 families connected to the oil industry, all gathered in one place to celebrate another year of keeping the lights on and the gas flowing. It was also where Ashley and Preston decided to make their first public appearance as a couple. I found out from Mrs. Henderson, whose husband worked in plant management. She'd seen them holding hands near the beer garden, acting like teenagers, according to her disapproving assessment. Bold move, Clay said when I told him. Most people having an affair try to keep it quiet until the divorce is final. Preston's arrogant. He thinks he's untouchable because he's a lawyer who handles corporate contracts. And Ashley thinks she's the victim in all this. We were sitting in Clay's truck in the parking lot of the refinery grounds, watching the crowd through binoculars. It was Saturday afternoon, the busiest day of the event, and it looked like half of East Texas was there. The smell of barbecue smoke mixed with the industrial scent that always hung around the refinery created a uniquely Texan atmosphere that reminded me why I'd never wanted to leave this place. There, Clay said, handing me the binoculars, by the barbecue pit near the Lone Star tent. I focused the lenses and found them. Ashley was wearing a sundress I'd bought her for her birthday last year, paired with expensive heels that would have been completely impractical for a refinery picnic if she'd still been married to me. Preston had his arm around her waist, and they were laughing at something one of his lawyer friends had said. They looked relaxed, happy, like they didn't have a care in the world. You want to go say hello? Clay asked. I considered it. Part of me wanted to march over there and cause a scene, make them as uncomfortable as they'd made me. But that would be emotional and messy, and I'd learned that revenge was better served cold and calculated. Not yet. Let them enjoy themselves. We watched for another hour, documenting their public displays of affection with Clay's camera. They shared a plate of brisket, rode the mechanical bull together, and stopped at several vendor booths where Preston bought Ashley small gifts with money he probably didn't have. The man was clearly trying to impress her, and she was eating it up. It was around 4:00 p.m. when they made their mistake. They'd been drinking beer in the beer garden, a fenced area where the refinery allowed alcohol consumption during the event. Preston had clearly had several, and his voice was getting louder and more animated as he told stories to his circle of admirers. Clay and I had positioned ourselves at a nearby picnic table, close enough to hear, but far enough away to avoid being noticed. I had my phone recording the entire conversation. The best part, I heard Preston say, his voice carrying that particular arrogance that alcohol brings out in certain types of men, is that She was completely wasted on this loser welder who couldn't see what was right in front of him. Ashley laughed and leaned into him, playing the role of the grateful woman who had been rescued from her boring marriage. He still doesn't know about half of it. What do you mean? Asked Michelle Parker, who worked at the bank with Jessica and had always been hungry for gossip. Let's just say I've been planning my exit strategy for longer than 6 months, Ashley said, taking a long drink from her beer. I'm not stupid enough to leave a marriage without securing my future first. Preston raised his beer in a mock toast to forward thinking and better options. They clinked glasses while Michelle and the others laughed, completely unaware that they were providing me with the best evidence I could have asked for. Clay and I kept walking, but I'd heard enough. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording app I'd been running. Did you get all that? Clay asked quietly. Every word. She just admitted to planning this for longer than she originally told me, and he basically confessed to knowingly breaking up a marriage. Michelle Parker heard it too, and she's the second biggest gossip in town after Mrs. Henderson. By evening, the story would be all over Millfield. By Monday, it would be embellished and exaggerated beyond recognition, but the core truth would remain. Ashley Phillips and Preston Brooks had publicly humiliated Wade Phillips at the town's biggest social event, which was exactly what I'd been hoping for. I called Stephanie from the parking lot. They just gave us everything we need, I told her, playing back the recording. Perfect. File for divorce on Monday. Make sure you request a full asset disclosure and ask for temporary spousal support from her to you. Can we do that? She's been working and earning money while conducting an affair that destroyed the marriage. She's also been concealing assets and planning her exit strategy by her own admission. A judge might very well order her to support you while the divorce is pending. How long will this take? 4 to 6 months if she fights it, less if she's smart enough to settle. She won't settle. She still thinks she's going to come out of this ahead. Then we'll have to educate her. Monday morning, Stephanie filed the divorce papers. By Monday afternoon, Ashley had been served at her real estate office in front of her boss and 3 co-workers, including the receptionist, who'd been wondering why Ashley had been taking so many long lunch breaks lately. She called me that evening, furious. You're asking for spousal support from me? My lawyer thinks I have a good case. Apparently, infidelity and asset concealment don't look good in family court. This is insane, Wade. You make more money than I do. Actually, according to the tax returns we filed together, you made more money than me last year. Real estate was good to you. That was 1 year. It's the most recent data we have. And since you've been planning your exit strategy for longer than 6 months, your words, not mine, it seems like you've been pretty confident about your earning potential. Silence on the other end. I want to settle this quickly and quietly, she finally said. I'm sure you do, but you forfeited your right to quick and quiet when you decided to parade your affair around the refinery family day. What do you want, Wade? I thought about that question. What did I want? I wanted my marriage back, but that was impossible. I wanted the last 8 years of my life back, but that wasn't happening either. I want you to face the consequences of your choices, I said finally. All of them. She hung up. 3 weeks into the divorce proceedings, the forensic accountant Stephanie had hired found more money. Ashley had been moving assets for almost 8 months, not 6. There was another account we didn't know about, and she'd been paying Preston's car lease for the past 3 months. She'd also bought him a new laptop and paid for a weekend trip to Dallas that she'd claimed was a real estate conference. She's been essentially supporting him, Stephanie explained, while stealing from your joint accounts. The judge is going to freeze all her accounts until this is resolved. What does that mean? It means she won't be able to access any of her money until the divorce is final. If she wants to eat, she'll have to ask Preston to support her. I thought about Preston's reaction when he realized his sugar mama was about to be cut off. This should be interesting. It gets better, Stephanie continued. I also found out that Preston's been lying about his income. He owes back taxes and has 2 judgments against him from creditors. He's broke, Wade. Ashley's been supporting a man who's in worse financial shape than she is. The next morning, Ashley called me in tears. Wade, please. You have to stop this. The bank froze my accounts. I can't even buy groceries. That's unfortunate. This is cruel. You stopped being my wife when you started sleeping with Preston. Now you're just someone I used to know who happens to share my last name. I'll give you everything back. The money I moved, all of it. Just call off your lawyer. It's too late for that, Ashley. You made your choices. Now you get to live with them. Preston says you're trying to destroy us. Preston's right. I am. Why? Why can't you just let us be happy? I thought about that question. Why couldn't I just let them be happy? Because they'd built their happiness on the ruins of my marriage. Because they'd humiliated me in front of the entire town. Because they'd stolen from me and lied to me and treated me like I was too stupid to figure it out. Because you don't deserve to be happy, I said finally. Not together and not with my money. The final settlement came 6 months later. Ashley got her car, her clothes, and a 5-year payment plan for the money she'd stolen. Preston had left Texas by then, apparently owing money to half the lawyers in Houston, and facing disbarment proceedings for issues that went far beyond our divorce. I kept the house, the savings accounts, my business equipment, and my self-respect. Most importantly, I'd learned something about myself that I'd never known before. I was patient enough to let justice take its course, and smart enough to use the system against people who thought they were too clever to get caught. 6 months after Ashley walked out of our house, I was sitting on my front porch on a Saturday evening, drinking a Lone Star and watching the sun set over the refinery. The industrial glow on the horizon reminded me that honest work still mattered in this world, that there were still places where a man's word meant something. Mrs. Henderson waved from her garden, and Lance Crawford honked as he drove past in his pickup. The town had moved on from the drama of my divorce, but the lessons remained. Actions have consequences, choices matter, and sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people get exactly what they deserve. I had plans now, the garage workshop I'd always wanted to build, maybe take that welding certification course I'd been putting off, maybe even start dating again when I was ready. I had time now, all the time in the world, and the wisdom to use it better than I had before.